Hello, busted babies, and happy Sunday to all of you. I'm so grateful for all of you being here this Sunday. I'm grateful that you woke up and that you decided to watch this video. Even if it's not Sunday anymore, when you watch this, I'm grateful for you. And I want you to know that I love you and I appreciate you being here on this earth. Unless you're one of two people or one or two people who I shall not name, I'm grateful for you being alive. So, I'm going to do a reading today on Sony because I was so enraged at, first of all, it's never sat right with me, and I know it's never sat right with so many people who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Um, the contentious relationship with Michael Jackson, the fact that there was a trial um, after his death, meaning that there was cause to believe that things weren't on the up and up. And I strongly believe that Sony had everything to do with the demise of Michael Jackson. We know that Michael Jackson did own 50% of Sony, which is why it was Sony ATV. Michael Jackson, I believe, was the ATV portion of Sony. When he passed away, they were able to acquire his share in Sony. And most recently, they were able to acquire a large portion, I would say 50% of his assets, his music and his publishing, valued over just over $1 billion for half of that. And that is outrageous when we all know how much Michael hated Sony ATV. And so, but I could go into the Jacksons again and read them, and I probably will. But first and foremost, which just fell out, judgment. First and foremost, I like to read Sony and their relationship with Mr. Jackson. Mr. Michael, it is the second day of Virgo season, is it? Second or third day of Virgo season? And Michael Jackson was a Virgo, is a Virgo. Well, he was a Virgo. We don't know if he still has a sign now on the other side. Michael Jackson was a Virgo, the most famous Virgo of our generation. So I would like to do this in honor of Michael Jackson and probably because of Michael Jackson. So I'm going to go ahead and read Sony, and I'll just get into it. Most High Mother and Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this platform. Thank you for my subscribers and the viewers who are watching this video. Thank you for my gift. Thank you for Michael Jackson. Most High Mother and Father God, please allow me to conjure up the entity of Sony Entertainment, or whatever they are. Sony Music, Sony Entertainment, Sony ATV. Spirit, did Sony have anything to do with the demise of Michael Jackson? Did Sony directly contribute to the demise of Michael Jackson? Did they or did they not? Gather up the spirits of the involved parties, dead or alive, and allow them to enlighten me on Sony's relationship with Michael Jackson and whether it was contentious at the time of his passing or not. Spirit, did Sony have anything to do with the demise of Michael Jackson? this means, because I just did the Braxton's reading. This was the first card that came out. Something is in the air. The Fool is ruled by, I believe, Uranus. Okay. You know what the Braxtons and the Jacksons have in common? Toni Braxton has always maintained that her mother was like Joe Jackson. I just finished doing the Braxton's reading, and I'm doing Sony ATV. Same card, same position. I'm starting to think that even as early as the beginning of Michael's career, someone who was involved with Sony, or someone who would later become involved with Sony, was a part of Michael Jackson's claim to fame, even at an early stage, and or someone in his family had a lot to do with facilitating his relationship with Sony. They were always going to be famous, and this is what I said about Miss Evelyn, because I read her. Much like Joe Jackson or Miss Evelyn, Joe Jackson had a failed music career in his early life, and he saw to it that his children, by any means necessary, picked up that baton and carried it off. I also said that he would Miss Braxton would line them up, and she knew which ones she would put the force behind, or which ones, because she knew which ones had a better chance of getting picked up by the industry. Whether Toni was the only one, Toni was a main contender for Miss Braxton. No matter how much they say, she groomed them all the same, and Toni would just so happen to be at a gas station and Clive Davis or somebody heard her sing. I don't believe that. And I don't believe it even more seeing this card, because I know, and we know from the public story of Michael Jackson and the Jackson family's upbringing, or at least it's been talked about behind the scenes, about the connections that Joe Jackson had and early backroom business dealings with executives and other businessmen early in those boys' careers that positioned them. It's almost as if they were promised or sold. Michael was promised or sold. Whether it was always Sony in the background of his career, me thinks that there were people involved with Sony always in Michael Jackson's life, steering his career, getting him to that point so that they could recoup on their investment at some point. I don't know. Another card that is very similar to the Braxtons. They had to take on all of the children. Now, the difference with the Four of Cups in the challenging position that I had in the Braxtons is that all of those girls were never supposed to be a part of the industry. They literally took them so that they could get Toni, because there was no other way Miss Braxton would allow them to have Toni without the other girls. In this case, all of the family was wanted in the industry. They all were. The industry made a place for all the Jacksons, especially early in their career when they were the Jackson 5. That's how Michael got his start. And even though the Braxtons were a group at some point, they were never a famous group. Fame didn't come into the Braxton name until Toni became a solo star, which is why it was the Four of Cups, because one person was wanted, but the other cups were able to get put on. In this case, all the children were industry darlings. Me also thinks that that's the problem. It's in the challenging position because these children were groomed for an industry that had no business with children. Not just that, but it is the foundation of the family's downfall. The industry ruined these families. Not so much the industry, though. The seeds were planted by the family upbringing behind the parents that herded their children into the industry. These children were sacrificed. I'll say that much. These children and their family was sacrificed a long time ago. Michael Jackson, once he became the one that the industry noticed, was the moment he was a dead man walking. Even if he was a child at that moment, his fate was signed, sealed, and delivered. Even then, there's also a lot of the same contention between the siblings. But in this regard, it's different because since each and every last one of those Jacksons had their own claim to fame, even if it was in their group, all of them saw themselves as a star. All of them had an opportunity. Unlike the Braxton girls, all of them didn't have a shot. They thought they did, but they didn't. They were always only going to be backups to Tony at best. Tamar, with all of her success, found a way out, but that was like a cheat code. And she still isn't at her potential because the industry as a whole recognizes the star power when they see it. And they recognized a long time ago that Tamar may have star qualities, but star power, she does not. She's too unstable. These boys, this family, turned on each other. There is some or one amongst the Jackson clan that were selling their brother out in many ways. And I've said this before in either in the Michael reading or the Janet reading. This is sad. But we know that. We know the rifts between the siblings and how Michael had to disassociate himself from everyone except for Janet. And the only reason he clung to Janet is because Janet had what it took to go out and really create a name for himself. Everyone else may have had the same opportunity. Not everyone knows what to do with it. That's the difference between star qualities and star power. Star qualities anybody can have. Star power means you become it. It's not just a talent, because that's star quality, talent alone, charisma alone. Star power is also savvy. It's called power for a reason. Power ain't all sugary and sweet. You got to be savvy. You got to know how to play the game. The rest of them didn't know how to play the game to get ahead for themselves. They played the game and got played in the long run. The problem is that these siblings, this family, has no loyalty to each other. And there were some amongst the group, and I will say some older siblings than Michael, who bartered him the same way his father did. Okay, so this was Michael Jackson wanting to not do business with Sony ATV anymore. And this is also Sony ATV recognizing that Michael had to go. Unfortunately, some of his siblings, and as we can see, siblings, family. I see siblings though, because the children, if they were involved in Sony acquiring Michael's assets, The relationship was already primed. That deal was already primed by some of the siblings who were in bed with bartering Michael Jackson for Sony. They may not have been able to do some of the things that they were able to do with Michael if it wasn't for some people in his family going behind his back, working with his ops. Who needs enemies with family like this? Michael wanted no parts of Sony. It seems that he wanted to leave them. And the This Is It tour was his last dealing with them before he went off to do something else. It seems like start his own something. Whatever Michael was about to do, it was about to be something to where he was the leader. I don't know if Michael was going to start his own label or do something with the ATV portion of Sony. But he had plans, and his siblings, it seems, or people in his family were saboteurs. Michael did not, at the time of his death, want any business dealings with Sony, and he was leaving them. Now, the Five of Cups in reverse was his death. The problem with this is, though, is that it's not an upright Five of Cups. So there's something off about any kind of portrayed grief or paying of respects to Michael Jackson as it came to Sony. Even the This Is It tour that they showed after his death, even though he was recording it and doing it prior to, fake, phony, and fallacies. They never cared, and they were not mourning him. His death was planned, allegedly. And they did not feel bad about it. There seemed to have been a necessary period of waiting. Not saying that them trying to acquire his assets wasn't always in the works. They've been working at it for a long time. But it seems like after his passing, they couldn't do it right away because there was already the trial. There were already conspiracy theories about their involvement in his passing. And so they decided to wait a little while before they struck again. There also might have been some family members who were a little iffy at the time on doing business with Sony because they were afraid after Michael's passing. They were afraid. But it seems like those members have overcome that fear and decided the best way to do things would be to go ahead and do this deal with Sony. Things could be buried in this deal with Sony. Secrets, dirty secrets of betrayal. It's almost as if case closed with giving Sony these assets. Sony had spies and evil people all around Michael Jackson at the time of his passing. He was in a den of wolves at the time of his passing. He was trapped. There was almost no one around Michael who he could trust. No one. No one. And he knew that. He knew it, which is why this is the Eight of Swords. Methinks he was planning his escape from this situation, and they knew that. And so a decision was made, a plot, a plan. Michael feared his life towards the end of his death, the end of his life, methinks that at some point Michael knew that this was going to happen and that there was no way out, almost. Michael knew. And probably by the time it was too late, he knew that even the people that he trusted, he shouldn't have. Michael was absolutely plotted against. I got this card and didn't know exactly what it was. I think the day of or the day before the betrayal I endured with Michael and Natasha. I'm sorry, Andrew and Natasha. And I thought this card was me not being good enough for the position I was in. But no, it was a plot, a plan, a manipulation to destroy someone. The magician in reverse uses their power, their skills, their resources for the worst. His children, those babies that he adopted, was another hook that they had. I believe the children had a lot to do with the decision to do so. Unfortunately, Michael thought that trusting anybody else was better than trusting his family. Rightfully so, because there wasn't too many people around Michael who he could trust, family or otherwise. But he thought that by him raising these children, protecting them, navigating them, he thought that they would be the keepers to his legacy and they would do right by him along with his mother. Michael, I don't have to say this, but you know now, ain't no friends in the game, not even the ones you bring into this world, Michael, because they are not your kind. Maybe you should have went out and adopted some black babies, surrogated some black babies that look like you. But there's some trauma there in that. Michael's trauma led him to adopting these children. And for some reason, he thought that these children would do right by him. I don't know if they did. If they had any say-so in this transaction, those kids were infiltrated a long time ago. He also thinks that Michael, because of the trauma he endured, that early childhood trauma, he got stuck there too. It's hard when you have trauma in your developmental years to not become that inner child. And we know that Michael became that inner child that he got locked into. His lifestyle was a glaring testimony to the fact that Michael never recovered from his childhood trauma. In fact, no matter how much he grew, he bled out his inner child. And he lived his inner child out loud. Never Land, his interactions with children, his behavior. Now, I do believe that this meant that Sony did negotiate this deal with his children involved. And the family did so because, for one, they needed the money that they didn't have access to, that they will now. And two, them ninjas was scared of Sony. This relieves a lot of burdens off of them for dirty deeds done between them and Sony. The threat is off of them now. It feels like the threat was always present as long as they did not agree with Sony. And because a lot of them were in bed with Sony, giving Sony this makes it all go away again. It's almost some blackmail element to it. You were in bed with us, but we can make this all go away with the deal. These are people who were in bed together, and none of them could have really afforded to be each other's enemies or ops. But who has more power here, Sony or the Jackson family? Sony would have found a way to take the Jacksons down without getting themselves dirty. There's been conspiracy theories and rumors about Sony all this time, so much so that there was a trial. Sony was unscathed and untouched legally. Even if the whole world knew that Michael Jackson was murdered because of his, nobody's ever able to touch. So they would have been able to do the same thing with the family, ruin them, tarnish them, take them out. They needed the assistance of Sony. They needed the money. And they needed to get some of this weight off of their backs. Hopes and fears is that their secret, well-known secret, remains tucked away. The relationship between the Jackson family and Sony, unbeknownst to and knownst to Michael Jackson, because he knew that they were traitors in the midst. Let's just say the hope is that the relationship between them and how they assisted allegedly in the downfall of Michael is overlooked. And this is Sony's hope. So that lets me know that something in there could really do damage to Sony if known. The Torah, the book of the law, is on this card. So Sony, there is something that you could be charged with if people were to dig deeper into your relationship with the Jackson siblings or family. He wonders if this deal was lawful. Something legal could trip you up if it was known, Sony. Any attorneys watching this? I don't know how it could be uncovered, but if you want to take that on and you're an attorney, call me because we'll get to the bottom of it. Sony, you could be held legally accountable for something if somebody knew how to find it. Knight of Pentacles in reverse. Outcome. I don't believe Sony plans on doing much with Michael Jackson's catalog, because the people are not going to be here to support Sony having Michael's music and publishing. The fans will support Michael's stance at the time of his passing, and they will adhere to the conspiracy theories. So Sony, what you thought you were going to make by acquiring his music and his publishing, you will not. And I don't know if you wanted to. You wanted to have it, but I don't know if you planned on using it to make money. The outcome was also Michael Jackson not being allowed to go any further in his career. This knight, this Virgo knight, fell off of his horse, and so did his coin. And he fell off of his horse because he chose not to continue moving forward, doing business on behalf of the king. If my question was, did Sony ATV have anything to do with the death of Michael Jackson? I would say yes, because of this card. I would have gotten a nice major arcana of something like the Hangman, or even temperance in reverse, or judgment, if this was a passing of a night of a natural cause, or even an accidental. I might have gotten the temperance in reverse for too much medicine, which we know the propofol is what took him out. But that's not at the core of his death. That was the way that they chose to do it. The outcome is that Michael was knocked off of his horse so that he cannot continue to be the king, or become more of a king of pentacles. As we knew, or as I stated with this Fool card, Michael had plans. Let's see what those plans were. What is this Fool in the present position? Another pentacle in reverse. Sony never wanted Michael to acquire 50% of Sony. Obviously, they didn't. He, I believe, was going to start his own label, maybe signing his own acts. He was about to make a power business move, or his acquisition was a power business move, but Michael wasn't just going to stop at acquiring Sony just to be petty. Some pettiness was involved. He was trying to buy out his freedom and the freedom of other artists. And he was going to do right by artists. But the monopoly that these labels hold on artists will never be beneficial to the industry. Michael would have set a precedent that would have changed the entire layout of the industry. And if he would have done it first and then passed away, it would have been too late for them to take him out, because the damage would have been done when he did what he was going to do. Buying out the Beatles catalog and all of them wasn't so that he can own them. It's so that he could free them. Otherwise, Michael would have been stopped by those artist parties when they found out that he was trying to acquire them. They supported him in what he was doing and acquiring those shares of other people's music, because they knew that Michael was going to set them free. That's what Michael was going to do. Imagine Sony not having Michael Jackson or the Beatles catalog. They would not have survived. Michael was going to bankrupt Sony ATV by opening his own label, and not just an imprint. Now, this is a label that would have used Sony's resources to do everything that they don't want to do, which is not own artists, not enslave artists. That's why he had to go. And here's the judgment that I would have liked to see as the outcome: upright for a natural death. No. He had to go to keep these artists that he would have set free, past and present and future, because it would have set a new precedent for artists and for labels to not enslave and own their artists. So all those people that he would have changed, past and present and in the future, that wasn't allowed to happen. Michael Jackson was more than just the king of pop. He was going to be the Messiah of artists. Let me look into this judgment in reverse. The Emperor. Michael would have made himself an emperor in the industry, like Sony, like Warner, not even like Atlantic and all of them, because these old names, old money labels, they're even more powerful than, Atlantic Republic, but he would have been one of them. Neverland Records would have, whatever he would have called it, not Neverland, because that holds too much of a negative stigma to his past. It would have been maybe ATV. I don't know. But he would have been one of the big dogs. And I'm not talking about a Jay-Z gatekeeper. I mean, if the gatekeepers are there, then they're keeping the gate to the kingdom. Michael would have been one of the kingdoms. And he was put to rest for it, but he was also maneuvering a little bit in silence, or so he thought. This seems to be why he didn't want to keep releasing music, to keep giving Sony any rights to anything, or, oh, no. This is so that he couldn't set other artists free. He would have became a big dog. He was silenced and taken out before he was able to announce what he was doing, or before he was able to set other artists free that he'd acquired their masters to, in order to have the power to do what he did with Sony ATV and what he was about to do. I'm telling you, those artists like the Beatles and all of them, I'm inclined to believe that they were in full support of Michael inheriting their publishing, because he planned on giving it back, I believe. Yes, look at this Virgo, the king. Me also thinks a lot of his legal issues and issues had to do with that as well. I'm not saying whether he was guilty of those things or not, because I'm not looking into that. I see that Sony and their legal team had a lot to do with Michael's issues in the media, his personal issues, his legal issues. Oh my God, you can't really become what they are with the type of reputation that he had. And that's what that was, a lifelong smear campaign and sabotage. And Michael, you were complicit in a lot of it too, but you never stood a chance. You did the best with what you could because you were born and raised in the industry. That's why you never stood a chance, but you did the best you could to make a change and to make something out of the lifestyle that you lived in and was a part of. You wanted to make it right. Challenging. 6 of Cups. Michael, you had no idea to the extent that your family, some family members, were that actively involved. I don't think that you thought that they would have you taken out. I don't think you ever thought they would do that to you. Now, who is this Queen of Swords? Who is this Queen of Swords? Which one of Michael Jackson's sisters is an air sign? I believe Janet is an earth sign as well. She's a Taurus. This is a sister who knew. She spoke out. LaToya, I believe, because LaToya was always vocal. LaToya was always vocal. And she told us even after his passing what the real tea was. She was probably the only one that Michael should have trusted. Yes, LaToya, you knew that I don't even think he should have or could have completely trusted Janet. I don't know. But LaToya knows. Let me look at LaToya. I believe this is LaToya. Only because she's been the most consistently vocal about what's happened to her brother. Yes. She knew her brother was about what he was about to do with that money, and she knew Seems like she always had her siblings back, or she knew that he was trying to protect himself, or she felt like he should have, or she knew that he was fighting for his life once he acquired what he did. All of the above, methinks. Seems like she is a black sheep of the family because of her stance. Three of Pentacles in reverse. All of Michael's legal issues and fighting had a lot to do with him wanting to break away from the machine of Sony and do his own thing. Five of Swords, all his battling in the media, the blows to his reputation. I believe he was set up a lot. Even if he did place himself in very weird positions, like having strange relationship with boys. I don't know. I'm not here to say whether sex actually was involved. I'm saying that the media portrayal of Michael Jackson, him being drawn in and out of court, I believe was a setup. I believe people were set up and set in place to plant stories, to drag him in. It's to tarnish his reputation so much so that he can't go through with what he was trying to go through with. Now, around those times, this is actually when some sort of injections, some sort of injections they were putting into him. I believe it had a lot to do with the change of his skin. This was a long time coming. They had been poisoning Michael for a long time. I also believe that those sexual allegations with children, again, I don't know what that temperance in reverse, whether it's true, but what I'm saying is once he decided to break away from Sony, they started tarnishing his reputation, and soon after, he got introduced to some sort of doctor. I don't know if he had a valid medical issue or if his medical issues were induced. I believe they were. And here's his mother sitting here. She holds the keys to the kingdom. Crowning, Eight of Swords. Poor Michael. This is Michael, trapped, knowing that he never knew who he could trust. He was always very paranoid. Always very paranoid because he knew he was in a den of wolves. This is sad. A very paranoid man. And he was trying to be very careful in his dealings so that he can hold on to his money and his assets until he was able to make the things shake that he was planning on. He was doing a lot of this in silence. Not even a lot of his team knew. And he knew that he needed to keep these things to himself, close to his chest, until he can move things around and set things in place. But Michael, unfortunately, you couldn't trust anybody. Not even the people that you thought you could. The Magician in reverse. Ace of Cups. Seven of Cups. This reminds me of Tony's reading so much. Jealousy, because Michael was the chosen one. You know, it said, I continue to believe that one of his siblings was equally in bed with Sony. They might not have been able to do this if it wasn't for one of his siblings. They wouldn't have been able to do it. That kind of envy, malice, and jealousy. Even when he started disassociating himself because he knew he was the chosen one, they resented him for that even more than the fact that the industry chose him. Him accepting being the industry darling is what made them hate him. Because, like with Tony, she sacrificed herself to take her family on. She never detached like she wanted to do. Michael did. And they hated him for not sacrificing himself and saying, no, you won't get me if you don't have us all. He said, no, F them. And they said, bet. Michael, your family, members of your family, methinks were worse for you than Sony. They wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Five of Cups in reverse. This Queen of Wands in reverse. Who the hell is this? Oh, is this you, Paris? What is her zodiac sign? I don't think it matters here. They're easily Paris. Jackson. Let me see if it'll. Let me see. Birthday. What is her birthday? Ah, she's an Aries. It is her. This Queen of Wands. Now, is Paris the one who wouldn't go through with it? Or is Paris the one who wanted to so bad? Ooh, I see a party. A celebration. Oh, she just had a birthday. Brenda Song wishes her fellow Aries, Paris Jackson, a happy birthday. Let me look into Paris. Page of Cups reverse, the Death. Tower reverse. Paris needed that money. Paris, you had a lot to do with this deal going through, methinks. You don't like your black family, Paris. You acknowledge yourself as a white woman. And you're only a Jackson by name, allegedly. Oh, yes, Paris, you are happy. You are happy to do this deal with Sony and be on with it because you wanted the money and you were sick of having to go through your grandmother and all those other Jacksons. Ugh. The Sun, those children were the worst thing that you could have ever done. Michael Jackson. Hate to say it. I see the taking the mother somewhere and lying to her or keeping her unaware of things. I did this in the reading that I did on Catherine, I believe, when I talked about that kidnap situation where they took her away and she couldn't get in contact with the grandkids or something like that. I see that there was an attempt then on getting the money. Some documents may have been signed by other members of the family if the mother was deemed to be missing or unalived. Miss Jackson, I don't know how you got out of that situation or which one of your children had anything to do with it. Maybe Janet, but I don't think you were supposed to make it. I see an attorney involved with the family's estate or something like that. There was an attempt to get you off of the family's estate from being able to make decisions or something like that. Hopes and fears, the high priestess. Michael's death didn't have to be. In order to cut him out of his assets and any potential earnings. And the problem is that people know about it. That's why it's in the hopes and fears position, because it's an open secret. But they're hoping that it stays a conspiracy and that no one ever legally, based on the Torah, the book of the law, legally looks into it or tries to persecute them. Miss Jackson, I think there was an attempt that time to take you out. Final outcome, Knight of Pentacles. I think this is Sony. Sony, the doctor. If it wasn't that black doctor, it would have been some other doctor. Did he do any time? I think he did, but something makes me feel like he took the blame for something. Someone, maybe Janet, want to, I don't know. Somebody seems like they want to put out. Be careful for any of the Jacksons that come out and release something. A project, they speak out, side-eye them. A woman Jackson, side-eye them. Unless it's Latoya, because if she speak out, she gonna spill tea. Janet, I don't know if there was a project you wanted to put out, but couldn't or didn't because of your brother's death. Janet, it seems that you also got into your relationship really quick and in a hurry. I don't know if you were scared. Did you do that for protection? Marrying that Arab? I see that he was abusive, but he served a purpose. There seemed to have been another attempt on Michael's life, whether he knew it or not, but it wasn't successful. And it had the siblings involved. Maybe another doctor, a previous doctor. It was unsuccessful, and it starts some fighting amongst the people who were trying to make it happen. Because it was unsuccessful, it might have alerted Michael to the fact that somebody was trying to take him out. So he started cutting more people out. They had to go another route, another doctor, another reason to administer him medication. But there was an attempt before that Michael got wind to at some point, whether he knew it was an attempt on his life or he knew that it was just some betrayal and backstabbing involving his family or someone in his circle. It alerted Michael to the fact that he wasn't safe. And that's when he started trusting no one. Unfortunately, except for the people he thought he could trust. And it was very few people. But A den of wolves. Michael, there was nobody around you could trust except for Latoya. And it seems like nobody really listened to her, because she was always the one who didn't go along, maybe not all the way. She was the rebellious one, it seems. All right, Sony, that's unfortunate, allegedly. All power to Michael. King Virgo. Blessings.